Well, with less than an hour until we say goodbye to 2019 and hello to 2020, we're taking a look back tonight at what has definitely been a very memorable year all across the First Coast, from the off and on again sale of JEA to a farewell to the Jacksonville landing, and then Minshew Mania. Here's Katie Jeffries with a look at the top stories from 2019.
The face of downtown changed quite a bit this year. The old City Hall and Courthouse Annex came down in a dusty blaze of glory. And though it was once considered an icon of downtown, the decision was made to demolish the Jacksonville landing. What will replace it, we don't know just yet. For now, get excited about another grass lot. We also watched two incredible rescues unfold on water. In May, a Boeing 737 with 142 people on board skidded off the runway at NAS Jacksonville and into the St. Johns River during a strong thunderstorm. Rescuers rushed to the scene to help the terrified passengers get off the plane and get them to safety.
It is a miracle. It could have ended we could be talking about a different story this evening.
Then in September, the Korean cargo ship, the Golden Ray, overturned in the St. Simon Sound. Most of the crew was able to safely escape, but 4 crew members were trapped inside. Rescuers, though, were determined to find them, but it was too dangerous to try and go inside the ship. They heard tapping, though, coming from the survivors inside, and they were able to drill a hole through the hull, and though the men had spent days with no food or water and they were in sweltering heat, they all survived. Also in Glenn County, we saw the community come together to help save 47 pilot whales that beached themselves in July. 2 died, but dozens were saved by the quick actions of marine officials and volunteers. The First Coast also showed its heart in the search for 2 firefighters that went missing off the Florida coast. JFRD firefighter Brian McClooney and his friend and fellow firefighter from Virginia, Justin Walker, set out for a day of offshore fishing, but never returned. The first responder community rallied to search, and members of the public jumped in to help any way they could. Over 105,000 miles were searched, but only a small tackle bag was ever found.
Our computer modeling and our ability to search in a given location are no longer allowing us to search with any reasonable degree or probability of success.
With heavy hearts, the U.S. Coast Guard had to end the active search for Justin and Brian, but they will not be forgotten by their hometowns. The courtroom also proved to be a place of unfolding drama. Several high-profile cases were heard this year, including former Jacksonville City Council members Katrina Brown and Reggie Brown. Both were found guilty on dozens of fraud charges surrounding the misuse of loan money for a barbecue sauce factory project that they had said would bring jobs to an underprivileged neighborhood. They'll be sentenced in January. And a case that stretched over 2 decades finally came to an end. Michael Haim was found guilty in the death of his wife Bonnie in 1993. Bonnie's family had suspicions from the start, but no idea what happened to her until Bonnie and Michael's son Aaron uncovered his own mother's remains in the backyard 20 years later. Michael was taken into custody, found guilty, and sentenced to life in prison. In Clay County, in a move that stunned his own attorney and the courtroom, Donald Davidson pled guilty to the murder of Roseanne Welsh and the sexual battery of her young daughter.
This was one of the most gruesome cases that anybody here in our time frame has seen.
He was sentenced to death. The First Coast also held its collective breath, hoping to safely find 2 girls who went missing. Ayanna Sawyer disappeared from Terry Parker High School in December of 2018. She was 5 months pregnant at the time, and in January of this year, we saw the search for her take an ominous turn as authorities began searching a Baldwin landfill. Her body has not been found, but her uncle, Jonathan Quillis, has been charged with her murder. The community also prayed for little 5-year-old Taylor Williams. An Amber Alert went out for her in November after her mother said she disappeared from their Brentwood home. But suspicion quickly turned onto her mother, Brianna Williams. Officers searched the neighborhood and their old Southside apartment, but then the search extended to an area of woods near Demopolis, Alabama. It was there that little Taylor's body was found. Then Taylor's mother tried to take her own life, but survived and was charged with child neglect and lying to investigators. We also heard some hotly debated topics in City Hall, like the half-cent sales tax referendum the Duval County School Board wanted to help aging schools. While the school board wanted to move forward with a special election this year, they couldn't get the votes to do it from City Council. The school board even got their own lawyers and sued the city of Jacksonville for denying the half-cent sales tax from being put on the ballot. You'll probably be hearing more about this in 2020.
But I do believe that us as residents in the city should have a say-so.
Something else you're going to be hearing about next year, the proposed sale of JEA. This is something Jacksonville has been hearing about since 2018. But this year we saw movement in the process to find bidders. But with much of the process being done behind closed doors and then news breaking of major compensation deals for the board and top executives making the decision, skepticism about the transparency of the process grew, with even city council members loudly voicing their concerns. But buckle in, this is going to be a headline in 2020. In the sports world, the Jacksonville Jaguars brought the Super Bowl MVP and $88 million man, Nick Foles, to be the new quarterback of the team. The season started with high hopes, but in his first game, on his first touchdown pass, Foles broke his clavicle, meaning he was out for the next several games. While in the moment it seemed like all hope was lost, Minshew Mania was born. The sixth-round pick, Gardner Minshew II, wowed the Duval fan base, and his jerseys couldn't be printed fast enough. And men around the First Coast began sporting the trademark mustache. Minshew Mania took over not just Duval, but the NFL fan base as well. He won multiple Rookie of the Week awards. Amidst the Minshew Mania, Jag star Jalen Ramsey made it clear he wanted off the team. After sitting out games complaining of back pain, he was traded to the LA Rams. The Jacksonville Sharks captured the 2019 Arena League Championship, while the Icemen brought playoff hockey back to the First Coast for the first time in nearly 2 decades. And for the first time in its 143-year history, the oldest trophy in sports traveled to the nation's oldest city. The Stanley Cup came to the First Coast in August, courtesy of St. Augustine resident Mike Van Ryn, an assistant coach for the St. Louis Blues. In weather, we skirted through hurricane season relatively unscathed, though it was a close call as the monster storm Hurricane Dorian passed about 100 miles offshore. Though the First Coast fared with no major damage, the community here quickly organized to help parts of the Bahamas left devastated. And our community is full of people wanting to give back to others. Seth Owen was kicked out of his home by his family after he came out to his parents, but he turned that pain into triumph by landing a full ride to Georgetown, and this year he started a nonprofit group to help other marginalized teenagers and provide scholarships. We were also taught a lesson in compassion after Amy McIntyre saw Jonathan Ross sitting on the street, homeless, looking ill. She took him to the hospital and found out he had an infected leg and cancer of the eye. He was cared for by the hospital staff, but so he didn't have to return to the streets, Amy opened up her home to him so he could have a safe place to stay. And speaking of home, Clifford Booney Williams and his nephew Nathan Myers were finally able to go home after being wrongly convicted 43 years ago.
I just want to live my life peaceful and lovable. That's all I want to do.
It marked the first time in Florida history that a conviction reversal was initiated by the prosecutors. Williams met his grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and importantly for both men, their names were cleared from the horrendous crime. And before 2019 came to an end, the community came together once again, this time to search for 2 siblings who had gone missing from their home. Officers, firefighters, and volunteers searched the woods, but after 2 days, hope for a safe recovery began to wane. Then a JFRD firefighter heard voices of children and found Braxton and Brian Williams in a pump house far back into the woods, hungry and dehydrated, but okay. It was a Christmas miracle. We also took a trip across the ocean to remember the heroic military members that stormed the beach of Normandy 75 years ago. Lewis Turner and Jeannie Blaylock with photographer Jeff Renfro, they traveled the beach there where so many lost their lives fighting for our country. They interviewed survivors and heard stories about the bravery of that day. And here locally, we welcomed home our military members who'd been so far away from their families. So many stories, some heartbreaking, some uplifting, and so many changes in the last year. But it's all a part of the story of the First Coast. In Jacksonville, Katie Jeffries, First Coast News, on your side.